problems and the war on poverty, and the name has stuck with us, but we do research on a whole range of issues, domestic, international, and everything. So what I want to do is pick up, I think, a little bit where Heidi stopped, and she set it up just perfectly. And I'm going to do a couple of things. One is just sort of summarize and take away a few points that Heidi raised about the economy and unemployment, and also echo what she said about the government fiscal situation at the national level and at the state and local level. And then I'm really going to shift and say what are the challenges and opportunities right now for policymakers and planners. I've only been with you for about 2 hours, but I feel like I got some new friends already. And so I'm really glad to be here. And if I come again, I'll know more about what it is you do and what you're interested in ahead of time. Many of the issues that I'm going to talk about that could really address some of the things that Heidi was mentioning are things that the national government should be doing. But what I tried to do was highlight what I think could happen at the state and at the community level. First, in terms of a little bit of background again, as Heidi said, it's the longest, most severe economic downturn that we've had since the Great Depression in the 1930s. There is no doubt about that. The implications are huge. We have about 14 million people are still out of work, and that there are more that have given up. The discouraged workers that Heidi talked about. I would add to what she said that what I'm seeing happening, and again, I'm a public policy analyst. I do sort of political and economic analysis. I'm not a straight economist. What I'm really seeing is a shift in the nature of work in another way as well, which is perhaps more non-standard employment, more informal employment. So counted in the discouraged worker category that don't show up on any of the graphs and statistics may be some millions of people who are in sort of, as we sometimes say in some communities, sort of below the radar a little bit, and that's where they want to stay, for now anyway. They're outside the tax system. And that's both employers and workers. So there are more, I think, non-standard arrangements than we've had in the past. It's very difficult to get estimates of that. We think maybe 25% of the total employment may be sort of informal, off the books, no record of it anywhere. The other notion that came up as Heidi was talking, and I know with my students, I sometimes get them talking about sort of a lot of the theories about the end of empire scenarios. And it could be that if we have as long a static recovery, the jobless recovery, which, as Heidi said, all the economists are projecting we've got another 3 to 5 years of stagnation that's likely to occur. Even when we come out of it, even when, as Heidi says, things are going to be good in 3 years, what is it that we're going to have in those 3 years? Are we a different nation than we were before the recession? We're certainly not the nation we were in 1999, 1998, before September 11th. And now with the changes occurring in the global market, it sort of changes who we are as a nation. And as many states and counties around the country have dealt with issues around avoiding the race to the bottom and making their business environments better for investment, we are probably at a point nationally where we need to be having a national dialogue about what we want our role to be in the global marketplace as well. And if in fact we want, which I agree with Heidi, what I would like to see is a nation where everybody's skills are upgraded, so that we're the high skill and high investment part of the global economy. But the reality is, as Heidi also said, that a lot of the jobs that we have are low skill, low paid. So when you look at the projections, which I'll talk about in a moment without statistics, is that we have growth at the high end for high skilled workers, and we have even more growth at the low end for low skilled workers. So we have sort of a dual system, and the gap between the rich and the poor is getting bigger, as all of you know. So the long recession, the millions who are still out of work, the additional millions who are discouraged, even more of those who may also be in informal, non-standard employment. Half of the employed, half of the officially unemployed are long-term unemployed, which means they've been out of work for 6 months or longer. And that's the, I think that's the highest it's been since the Depression also, right? And again, the persistently high unemployment and the very, very slow, sluggish recovery is especially severe for women and black men. And I'll get back to that in a moment. Okay. We have disproportionate patterns, as I just said. African Americans and Hispanics have higher unemployment rates, as shown on Heidi's chart. But immigrant men have been slightly better than the national average. Part of that could be sort of a stabilizing over time. We're seeing a change in the women's side, women's unemployment. Although men have had higher unemployment rates during this recession, women's unemployment rate lately is not declining, and for some demographic groups of women, it's actually going up a little bit. So even though the women there's a political soundbite that was the women were doing okay, and what does this mean sociologically? The past few months, as the longer the recession goes on, the longer the stagnation and the static growth is happening, the women are beginning to feel more of the effect there. Single mothers, as Heidi said, it's a really serious problem, because a lot of the poor children that we see are poor because they're in households where there's only one income, whether it's a single-parent household or a two-parent household where now they only have one income or sometimes no income. And the real detriment is to the children. As you can see, the poverty rate overall is going up, and it's going up particularly for children. And again, the other, and I know at lunchtime we were also talking about the issue around young people and youth, and I'll get back to that in a moment, but youth unemployment rate is 2 to 3 times the national average, and for African American youth it is even quadruple the national average. So we have some people who are in much worse shape, as Heidi said. Okay. The other thing that Heidi also set up for us is that this is a different context for the recovery period than we've had in past recessions. There's a different economic structure. 25% of the jobs used to be in manufacturing. Today, only 10% of the jobs are in manufacturing. So we've moved out of the old agricultural into the industrial and manufacturing, and now we're into service, and now we're out of sort of the service growth area as well, and we're in sort of a post-industrial era. And what that means for sort of reemployment is very important. I'll get to. We have a very different workforce. We have more women in the workforce than ever before, more immigrants, and more older workers. That's not likely to change. And we've seen the statistics on that. The trends are likely to continue. We also have more dislocation of both firms and workers. I do a lot of research. I have lots of research projects. I have about 8 right now. I do program evaluations. I'm still doing a Recovery Act study looking at employment, workforce development, all of the employment training administration's recovery spending in 30 states. So I've done a lot of field work in a lot of states. And as you travel around the country, you can easily see that sort of the dislocation of workers goes along with the dislocation of firms, goes along with the dislocation in communities. So that it's not just dislocated workers can't be looked at in isolation, because the firms and the businesses and the communities are going down with them. A couple of anecdotes. I do a lot of work in Michigan, so I go to Michigan about every 2 months. And over the past year, the first, probably 2 years ago when I was going to Michigan, and I don't know if anyone here is from Michigan, you can correct me. Oh, good. When you're flying into Detroit, you come down low and you can see the parking lots. And 2 years ago, a lot of those parking lots were empty. Around the plants, around the factories, there was nobody in the parking lots. They were empty. The hotels were empty. The restaurants were empty. the storefronts, you could drive for miles at a time, and they wouldn't see a strip mall that had any open business. About a year to 14 months ago, I started seeing the change. So as I go back now, you're seeing more vitality come around. So clearly things are a little bit better in the country. I think, although I don't know this for sure, we haven't got a lot of analysis of this, although I'm sure if there was analysis, the White House would have it and they would publicize it, so it probably doesn't exist. I think that the Recovery Act spending probably did have something to do with some of the decline that it shows up in the statistics. It's also still out there a little bit. So the Recovery Act money is, the congressional authority is over, but the money is still being funneled through in a lot of cases, both in the government sector, but also in the business sector. So I know as I travel around, I say, oh, there's some Obama construction. We're still getting Obama tax credits when we send in our taxes. So that there is still a little bit of Recovery Act money wending its way through the system. And I would say that if we didn't have that, the situation would be worse. We wouldn't have the kind of even little bit of recovery that we're seeing at this point. So the new economic structure, both in terms of being in a post-manufacturing environment, having more women, more immigrants, more older workers than in previous recessions, and more dislocation and loss of some of the underlying framework of the economies, means that it is much harder in this recovery for individuals and for firms to rebound. And so some of the challenges, I think, but hopefully some of the opportunities that I'm going to mention relate to that. How can we make it easier, especially for firms and workers, to try to deal with some of the recovery, given that their context has changed and the role of the United States in the global economy has changed? Okay. Two of my recent books, my most recent book is on the social safety net, and the one right before that last year that I did with Harry Holzer is on reshaping the U.S. workforce in a changing economy. And to pick up on another point that Heidi raised, the U.S. economy is very resilient. So one of the chapters in our workforce book looks at what is all this offshoring of jobs? Are we really losing jobs to other countries, and what's the long run implication of that? And in fact, the economists who look at that, and when you go back even 100 years, the economists conclude that the U.S. is able to absorb shocks, and the U.S. economy is able to rebound. It rebounded, for example, when after World War II and all the women had gone into the labor force during World War II, they said, oh, now they're going to leave the labor force. Well, they never did. We never left the labor force. We're still there, and the economy did fine. I'm a baby boomer, like I know some of you are. Not that I can tell, but we sort of relate to each other. By the way, I've done some studies on the aging of the baby boom generation, and the first study that I did about 10 years ago, I was trying to sensitize the workforce development community to the needs of older workers, to begin to plan for older workers and the like. And everywhere I went, the rooms were just jam-packed, and I said, wow, people really want to hear what I have to say. No, that wasn't it. It was all of us that were coming to hear, another baby boomer coming to hear about themselves. But our U.S. economy absorbed the baby boom generation fine. We've absorbed immigrants at many different stages just fine. And that when you look back over history, another set of analysis that I did with economists and political scientists in a book called The Government We Deserve, where we were trying to figure out what was different in the 1990s, was the antagonism toward the government, was the distrust of the government, was the gap between the rich and the poor. What was causing that was happening in the 90s? Why were so many people poor while we were in a booming economy in the late 1990s? And what we found, talking to historians, political scientists, economists, public pollsters, was that what was different was the post-World War II era. And if you look, instead of just looking back to the Depression, if you go back before the Depression, you can see that what was unusual, what was the anomaly in the U.S. development was that post-World War II period up to the mid-1970s. I always tell my students 1973 was sort of a watershed year. And if you entered the labor market before the middle of the 1970s, you're probably okay. Those baby boomers who came into the labor market after 1973 are not doing as well as those of us who came into the labor market before the middle of 1970s. And that was because of a lot of global issues. That was the time when we had to wait in line to get gas. It's when we could only get gas on alternate days in different states. We had hostages being taken all over the world. Poor Jimmy Carter, trying to green the country, and he had to deal with a lot of other issues instead. So that it was really the jolt, and also the debt that was accumulated from the Vietnam War. And all those things sort of banged in together, and we've never really recovered. So that the manufacturing sector has gone down. The economic viability of people in the workforce has declined. It's not that it is worse than it's ever been. It's just worse than it's been since World War II. It's worse than it's been since the Depression. And we need to sort of come to grips with what that means for a nation. But the changing global market and the trade scenario, I think, indicates that we can overcome it, but it might mean that we have to, and I'll mention this here, but then I'll maybe say something about it again. We may need to rethink intergovernmental relations. We may need to rethink our federalist structure. I don't think this time it'll be called New Federalism, although even right now in the political debates you can see the beginnings of the old New Federalism debate, which is make the states pay for Medicaid. It's that same, we heard that in the Nixon administration, we heard it in the Reagan administration. It's coming back again now. Have this swap. Okay, the feds will pay for a cutback Medicare, let the states pay for Medicaid. So that's sort of the swap. They've already taken care of welfare, that's gone. So that used to be part of the New Federalism proposal, and I think we're likely to see continuing shifts in that regard. We may also need to rethink the role of state and local and property taxes for funding particular services, and there the particular concern I think is around schools. And I was just in, anybody here from Tennessee? I was in Tennessee about a month ago, and when I was there, there's a big issue going on there. And again, I'm not a lawyer or a constitutional lawyer either. The Memphis schools have now done whatever the equivalent is for schools to do, so that they're bankrupt. And that technically, for many years, they've wanted to merge the school system with Shelby County, which is around, which Memphis is part of, but it's with a separate school system. And the county is saying, no, that's not our responsibility to take over the schools. So the city is saying, we're bankrupt, we can't run our schools. County, you have to do it. And the county said, no, that's not our problem. State, you have to do it. State said, no, that's not my problem. This county has to do it. It's going to be going to the Supreme Court. So the more we have those kinds of intergovernmental authority kinds of questions that are going up to the Supreme Court, I think it goes back to this end of empire. So if we have another 5 years of recession coming, we have a changing global marketplace and financial marketplace, and we have major public services like the schools not able to carry on. What it means is somebody needs to be thinking about sort of a wholesale restructuring of the federal, state, local relationship, which is a major sort of end of empire issue. Hopefully we come out of we're no longer the lead nation, I don't think, in a lot of areas. In some areas we are, but we're not a lead in everything. And hopefully we come out of it with a little bit of grace, not necessarily with a queen, but a little bit of grace like the British Empire did, and not like the Roman Empire in a fiery inferno. But okay, next. So what are the implications of the long-term unemployment